I had become very friendly with my social science professor, John Salter, who was in charge of NAACP activities on campus. This is Ann Moody, Coming of Age in Mississippi, published in 1968. All during the year, while the NAACP conducted a boycott of the downtown stores in Jackson, I had been one of Salter's most faithful canvassers and church speakers. John Salter's most faithful canvassers and church speakers during the last week of school. John Salter told me that sit-in demonstrations were about to start in Jackson. And he wanted me to be the spokesman for a team that would sit in at Woolworth's lunch counter. Two other demonstrators would be classmates of mine, Memphis Norman and Perlina Lewis. Perlina was a dedicated NAACP worker, but Memphis had not been very involved in the movement on campus. It seemed that the organization had had a rough time finding students who were in a position to go to jail. I had nothing to lose one way or the other. Around 10 o'clock the morning of the demonstrations, NAACP headquarters alerted the news services. As a result, the police department was also informed, but neither the policemen nor the newsmen knew exactly where or when the demonstrations would start. They stationed themselves along Capitol Street and waited to divert attention from the sit-in at Woolworth's. The picketing started at J.C. Penney's a good 15 minutes before. The pickets were allowed to walk up and down in front of the store 3 or 4 times before they were arrested. At exactly 11 a.m., Perlina, Memphis, and I entered Woolworth's from the rear entrance. We separated as soon as we stepped into the store and made small purchases from various counters. Perlina had given Memphis her watch. He was to let us know when it was 11:14. At 11:14, we were to join him near the lunch counter, and at exactly 11:15, we were to take seats at it. Seconds before 11:15, we were occupying 3 seats at the previously segregated Woolworth's lunch counter. In the beginning, the waitresses seemed to ignore us, as if they really didn't know what was going on. Our waitress walked past us a couple of times before she noticed we had started to write our own orders down and realized we wanted service. She asked us what we wanted. We began to read to her from our order slips. She told us that we would be served at the back counter, which was for Negroes. We would like to be served here, I said. The waitress started to repeat what she had said, then stopped in the middle of the sentence. She turned the lights out behind the counter, and she and the other waitresses almost ran to the back of the store, deserting all their white customers. I guess they thought that violence would start immediately after the whites at the counter realized what was going on. There were 5 or 6 other people at the counter. A couple of them just got up and walked away. A girl sitting next to me finished her banana split before leaving. A middle-aged white woman who had not yet been served rose from her seat and came over to us. "I'd like to stay here with you," she said, "but my husband is waiting." The newsmen came in just as she was leaving. They must have discovered what was going on shortly after some of the people began to leave the store. One of the newsmen ran behind the woman who spoke to us and asked her to identify herself. She refused to give her name, but said she was a native of Vicksburg and a former resident of California. When asked why she had said what she had said to us, she replied, "I am in sympathy with the Negro movement." By this time, a crowd of cameramen and reporters had gathered around us, taking pictures, asking questions, such as where were we from? Why did we sit in? What organization sponsored it? Were we students? From what school? How were we classified? I told them that we were all students at Tougaloo College, that we were represented by no particular organization, and that we planned to stay there even after the store closed. "All we want is service," was my reply to one of them. After they had finished probing for about 20 minutes, they were almost ready to leave. At noon, students from a nearby white high school started pouring into Woolworth's. When they first saw us, they were sort of surprised. They didn't know how to react. A few started to heckle. and the newsmen became interested again. Then the white students started chanting all kinds of anti-Negro slogans. We were called a little bit of everything. The rest of the seats, except the three we were occupying, had been roped off to prevent others from sitting down. A couple of the boys took one end of the rope and made it into a hangman's noose. Several attempts were made to put it around our necks. The crowds grew as more students and adults came in for lunch. We kept our eyes straight forward and did not look at the crowd except for occasional glances to see what was going on. All of a sudden, I saw a face I remembered. The drunkard from the bus station sitting. My eyes lingered on him just long enough for us to recognize each other. Today he was drunk too, so I don't think he remembered where he had seen me before. He took out a knife, opened it, put it in his pocket, and then began to pace the floor. At this point, I told Memphis and Lena what was going on. Memphis suggested that we pray. We bowed our heads and all hell broke loose. A man rushed forward, threw Memphis from his seat and slapped my face. Then another man who worked in the store threw me against an adjoining counter. Fuck. Down on my knees on the floor, I saw Memphis lying near the lunch counter with blood running out the corners of his mouth. As he tried to protect his face, the man who'd thrown him down kept kicking him against the head. If he had worn hard-soled shoes instead of sneakers, the first kick probably would have killed Memphis. Finally, a man dressed in plain clothes identified himself as a police officer and arrested Memphis and his attacker. Lena had been thrown to the floor. She and I got back on our stools after Memphis was arrested. There were some white Tougaloo teachers in the crowd. They asked Lena and me if we wanted to leave. They said the things were getting too rough. We didn't know what to do. While we were trying to make up our minds, we were joined by Joan Trumpar. Now there were three of us and we were integrated. The crowd began to chant, "Communist, communist, communist." Some old man in the crowd ordered the students to take us off the stools. "Which one should I get first?" a big husky boy said. "That white, Nigger," the old man said. The boy lifted Joan from the counter by her waist and carried her out of the store. Simultaneously, I was snatched from my stool by two high school students. I was dragged about 30 feet toward the door by my hair when someone made them turn me loose. I was getting up off the floor when I saw Joan coming back inside. We started back to the center of the counter to join Lena. Lois Chaffee, a white Tougaloo faculty member, was now sitting next to her. So Joan and I just climbed across the rope at the front end of the counter and sat down. There were now four of us, two whites and two Negroes, all women. The mob started smearing us with ketchup, mustard, sugar, pies, and everything on the counter. Soon Joan and I were joined by John Salter, but the moment he sat down, he was hit on the jaw with what appeared to be brass knuckles. Blood gushed from his face, and someone threw salt into the open wound. Ed King, Tougaloo's chaplain, rushed to him. At the other end of the counter, Lois and Lena were joined by George Raymond, a core Congress of Racial Equality field worker and a student from Jackson State College. Then a Negro high school boy sat down next to me. The mob took spray paint from the counter and sprayed it on the new demonstrators. The high school student had on a white shirt. The word Nigger was written on his back with red spray paint. We sat there for 3 hours taking a beating when the manager decided to close the store because the mob had begun to go wild with stuff from other counters. He begged and begged everyone to leave, but even after 15 minutes of begging, no one budged. They would not leave until we did. Then Dr. A. Daniel Bettle, the president of Tougaloo College, came running in. He said he just heard what was happening. About 90 policemen were standing outside the store. They'd been watching the whole thing through the windows. They had not come in to stop the mob or do anything, President Bettle went outside and asked Captain Ray to come in and escort us out. The captain refused, stating the manager had to invite him in before he could enter the premises. So Dr. Bettle himself brought us out. He had told the police that they had better protect us after we were outside the store. When we got outside, the policemen formed a single line that blocked the mob from us. However, they were allowed to throw at us everything they had collected. Within 10 minutes, we were picked up by Reverend Edwin King in his station wagon and taken to the NAACP headquarters on Lynch Street. After the sit-in, all I could think of was how sick Mississippi whites were. They believed so much in the segregated Southern way of life, they would kill to preserve it. I sat there in the NAACP office and thought of how many times they had killed when this way of life was threatened. I knew that the killing had just begun. Many more will die before it is over with, I thought. Before the sit-in, I had always hated the whites in Mississippi. Now I knew it was impossible for me to hate sickness. The whites had a disease, an incurable disease in its final stage. So, Ann Moody, coming of age in Mississippi.